In the awe-inspiring foothills of the Himalayas, where tranquil rivers meet its dense forests and air filled with chants from nearby temples, a relentless maneater once cast a pall of dread over the region of Rudraprayag. This ominous presence was not just a mere figment of imagination, but a very real and deadly man-eating leopard, which would soon be etched into the annals of history as one of the most notorious man-eaters ever known. From the quiet village of Benji, where it claimed its first victim in 1918, to the sacred paths leading to the revered shrines of Kedarnath and Badranath, the leopard's reign of terror was relentless and spanned 8 long harrowing years. And during this time, it wasn't just the isolated traveler who fell prey to the beast. Whole villages, in fact, were paralyzed with fear as the leopard audaciously attacked homes, breaking down doors and even clawing through walls to get to its victims. By 1926, the official death toll stood over 125 people, but many believe the actual number to be much higher, with countless attacks going unreported. The leopard's seemingly insatiable appetite for human flesh and its uncanny ability to strike with stealth and escape undetected earned it a legendary status, turning the once serene region into a landscape of fear and suspense. The leopard's reign of terror began with its first known victim, a resident of Benji village, and this occurred in 1918. Ganga Singh, a hard-working farmer from the village of Benji, had set out as usual one day to tend to his fields, expecting it to be like any other day. The sun was setting, casting a warm orange hue over the terraced fields, as Ganga Singh worked diligently, perhaps preparing the soil or checking on his crops. As the evening approached, the sounds of the village started to fade, replaced by the chirping of crickets and the distant call of birds. Unbeknownst to Ganga, a stealthy leopard was lurking nearby, watching and waiting for the opportune moment to strike. The next morning, a chilling scene awaited the villagers. Ganga Singh's lifeless body was discovered, bearing the gruesome scars of a violent struggle. The ground around him was disturbed, indicating a brief but futile resistance against the leopard. His tools lay scattered, and nearby crops were trampled, painting a grim picture of just how sudden and brutal this attack was. The village, which was now engulfed in a confusing cocktail of sorrow and fear, realizing that the rumors of the man-eating leopard were not just tales but a terrifying reality, would then begin to spread the word. As the leopard's notoriety grew, so did the tales of its audacity, and not long after the first incident, a heart-wrenching tragedy would once again unfold, and this time in a neighboring village. Lata Devi, a young woman known for her vibrant spirit and kind-hearted nature, had been spending a quiet evening with her family at her home. Their humble abode, like many in the village, had open windows to let in the cool mountain breeze. As the family sat together, perhaps sharing stories or discussing the day's events, suddenly and without any warning, the very same leopard, exhibiting an audacity that was beyond comprehension, made its move. With a swift and powerful leap, it lunged through the open window, its eyes fixed on Lata Devi. The room then erupted into chaos as family members shouted and tried to fend off the beast, but the big cat's agility and strength were unmatched, and in a matter of seconds, it had Lata Devi in its grasp, her terrified screams piercing the stillness of the night. It was at this time that neighbors, alerted by the commotion, rushed to the scene. But the speedy and powerful leopard, with Lata Devi in its jaws, would then vanish into the thickets. And by the time a search party was organized and torches were lit, it was tragically too late, and yet another village was left in shock and mourning. The sacred paths leading to the revered shrines of Kedarnath and Badranath, which once echoed with chants of pilgrims and the rings of temple bells, became hauntingly quiet. Pilgrims who once traveled in small groups began moving in large caravans, with hope that there was safety in numbers. Among these pilgrims was Ramprasad, an elderly man who was known for his deep spirituality and kind-hearted nature. He, along with a group of fellow pilgrims, not long after the last incident, was making his way through the dense forest chanting hymns and sharing tales of devotion. As the group traversed a particularly dense part of the forest, the atmosphere suddenly grew tense. The chirping of birds and the rustling of leaves had been overshadowed by an eerie silence. Unbeknownst to the pilgrims, they were being watched, stalked by the very embodiment of terror. Just moments later, once again without any warning of course, the stealthy feline sprang from a patch of brush, its eyes locked on Ramprasad. The group at this point scattered in panic, but the big cat's speed and precision of course were unparalleled, and before anyone could react, it would have a screaming Ramprasad in its deadly grip, his pleas for help drowned out by the chaos. The other pilgrims, paralyzed by fear, could at this point only watch in sheer horror as the leopard dragged Ramprasad into the underbrush, his cries echoing hauntingly into the forest. The incident would go on to send shockwaves through the pilgrimage route, and what was once considered a sacred and peaceful journey had turned into a treacherous path, with the shadow of the man-eating leopard looming large over every step. It was at this point that stories of the big cat's audacity would become the stuff of legends. On one fateful night, as the village of Kalimath lay enveloped in darkness, the leopard, driven by its insatiable hunger, approached a dimly lit hut. Inside, a family was deep asleep, unaware of course of the impending threat. With a swift and silent move, the leopard would manage to break into the hut, which is when it then targeted the youngest member of the family, a child named Kishan, who'd been sleeping next to his parents. And it was at this point that the leopard would clamp its jaws around the boy's neck, ensuring he couldn't cry out for help. The family would then wake up moments later to the horrifying sight of the leopard dragging Kishan away, and despite desperate cries and attempts to chase the beast, their efforts were futile as the cunning leopard once again disappeared into the night with its prey, leaving the family devastated and yet another entire village plunged into mourning with their worst fears realized. While official records documented 125 victims to the leopard of Rudraprayag, whispers in the villages spoke of many more. Some attacks went unreported of course due to them having occurred in remote locations, whereas others were overshadowed by the sheer frequency of the leopard strikes. In the village of Mangoli, as evening approached, the familiar sounds of daily life began to wind down. Parvati and her younger brother Mohan were making their way home, their voices blending with ambient sounds of the village. Parvati, with her lively spirit, was sharing stories about her eventful day, while Mohan listened intently. Their usual route took them through a patch of dense thicket, a well-trodden shortcut to their home. Engrossed in conversation, the siblings remained oblivious to the lurking danger. The notorious man-eating leopard, ever watchful, had its sights set on them. In yet another sudden and stealthy move, the leopard would then target Parvati. The beast's stealth was such that Mohan, despite being just beside her, was caught off guard, and by the time he turned to respond to her, she was already being dragged away by the leopard. Mohan's frantic cries would then pierce the evening air, drawing villagers to the scene. The very path which symbolized the quick route home had now become a haunting reminder of the leopard's terror, and once again, yet another village was left with an indelible mark in their collective memory. It was in the village of Kalimath that the leopard's audacity would reach new heights. Raghav's humble abode resonated with comforting sounds of family, and the aroma of a freshly cooked meal wafted through the air as Raghav, surrounded by his loved ones, shared stories from the day during a family dinner. Their laughter and chatter provided a stark contrast to the dangers that lurked outside. As the family enjoyed their meal, an ominous scratching sound echoed from the entrance. The initial confusion quickly turned to terror as they realized the source. The now legendary man-eating leopard was attempting to breach their sanctuary. The sturdy wooden door would resist the beast's initial attempts, but the leopard, relentless in its pursuit, would then shift its focus to the softer mud walls. With each scratch and dig, the leopard carved an opening, its determination evident. The room grew tense, the only sounds being the leopard scratching and clawing and the family's hushed breaths. Time seemed to stretch endlessly until finally, a breach was made, and what was once a dimly lit room was suddenly illuminated by the gleaming eyes of the leopard as it made its entrance. Raghav and his family, frozen in their spots, could only hope and pray as they faced the embodiment of what was their worst nightmare right in the heart of their home. The leopard, with its predatory gaze, scanned the room, its attention shifting from one terrified face to the other. And for a few brief but seemingly long moments, the room was filled with a tense silence, broken only by the soft growls of the leopard and the muffled sobs of the children. This is when Raghav, summoning all his courage, slowly reached for a heavy wooden staff that lay nearby. Without taking his eyes off the leopard, he then whispered to his family to slowly move to the back of the room. And just as they did this, the clever leopard's attention was then drawn to Raghav, almost as if it was sensing his intent. And this was when, with a sudden roar, it lunged at him. A desperate Raghav, using the staff, would then manage to fend off the initial attack, giving his family precious seconds to escape to a safer part of the house. The struggle between man and beast was intense, as the room echoed with the sounds of growls, shouts, and the clattering of objects being knocked over. Just as it seemed that the leopard would overpower Raghav, a loud bang echoed through the room, as a neighboring villager, alerted by the commotion, had fired a shot from his rifle, narrowly missing the leopard, but startling it enough for it to retreat. The leopard, realizing it was now outnumbered, would then make a hasty exit through the very same opening it had created, disappearing into the night. Raghav, though shaken and with a few scratches, was alive, and the village would rally around the family, providing comfort and support. Amidst the biting cold winter of 1921, the villagers of Tilwara sought solace and warmth around the communal fire. As the flames danced and flickered, casting a warm glow on their faces, the villagers were huddled closely, their breaths visible in the chilly air. The atmosphere was one of camaraderie, with laughter echoing and the occasional song filling the night. Vijay, a spirited young man known for his storytelling prowess, was recounting a particularly engaging tale. His animated expressions and vivid descriptions had everyone's rapt attention, but unbeknownst to them, another unwelcome set of eyes was also drawn to the gathering. Lurking at the periphery of the firelight's reach was the man-eating leopard, its eyes fixated on the unsuspecting group. As the tales grew more and more animated and the night deepened, the leopard would then see an opportunity, and with a stealth that belied its size, it crept closer, each step deliberate and silent. And before anyone could register its presence, the leopard would then spring forth from the shadows, which is when the leopard's powerful jaws would then clamp onto Vijay's throat, muffling any scream he attempted to let out. The force of the attack and the leopard's momentum dragged him away from the fire, his feet leaving a trail in the soft earth. The remaining villagers, frozen by the sudden turn of events, could only watch in horror as the comforting warmth of the fire, which moments ago had been a source of joy and unity, now seemed mocking in its brightness, casting long shadows that seemed to echo the terror of the night. The chilling silence that followed was broken only by the crackling of the fire and the soft whimpers of those who had just witnessed the unimaginable. At this point, the leopard's reign of terror had reached such proportions that it was no longer just a local concern, but had become a matter of state urgency. The government, recognizing the gravity of the situation, would then take decisive action. They dispatched units of Gurkha soldiers known for their bravery and combat skills to patrol the affected areas. Alongside them, British soldiers, armed with the latest rifles and guided by local trackers, scoured the forests and hills in search of the elusive beast. The locals, of course, too, were desperate at this point to end the nightmare. They would set up high-powered gin traps, which were large mechanical devices designed to clamp onto the leopard's limbs in hopes of immobilizing it. And poison baits were also strategically placed near known paths of the leopard, hoping to end its reign with a single lethal meal. The government, in a bid to incentivize its capture, would then announce substantial rewards for anyone who would kill or capture the beast. This would attract many renowned hunters from across the country, each confident in their skills and eager to claim the prize. But the leopard, with its uncanny intelligence and adaptability, seemed to always be one step ahead. It avoided the traps, steered clear of poison baits, and managed to elude even the most experienced hunters. It wasn't until this backdrop of mounting desperation that Jim Corbett, a name synonymous with big game hunting, would enter the scene in the autumn of 1925. Corbett was not just any hunter. In case you don't know, he was a legend known for his unmatched tracking skills and deep understanding of the jungle and its inhabitants. In fact, he had previously hunted down several man-eaters, and his reputation preceded him. Upon his arrival, Corbett spent weeks studying the leopard's patterns, its preferred routes, and its hunting techniques. He even interviewed locals, visited the attack sites, and meticulously pieced together the puzzle. The hunt was a game of patience and strategy, and there were many close encounters where Corbett didn't even see the leopard, but his instincts had told him that it was nearby, watching him from the shadows. It wasn't until the fateful night of the 2nd of May in 1926 that the climax of this intense cat-and-mouse game, if you will, would finally present itself. Corbett, after weeks of tracking and waiting, would finally track the leopard and manage to get a clear shot. And with a single bullet, he ended the 8-year-long reign of terror, and the beast that had haunted the dreams of the people of Rudraprayag lay defeated, bringing an end to a chapter that would forever be etched in the annals of history. The mystery surrounding the leopard of Rudraprayag's transformation into a man-eater has for a long time been a subject of much speculation and debate. What factors could drive an animal which typically preys on smaller mammals to develop such a voracious appetite for human flesh? Corbett, having spent considerable time studying and hunting man-eaters, developed a theory of his own. He postulated that the leopard's initial taste for human flesh might have in fact been accidental, stemming from the unfortunate circumstances of the time. The earlier 20th century was a challenging period for Rudraprayag. Disease epidemics, particularly cholera, swept through villages claiming countless of lives. Additionally, the world was grappling with the devastating effects of the Spanish flu in 1918, a pandemic that left millions dead globally. In the remote villages of Rudraprayag, the sheer number of deaths meant that not all bodies received proper burials. Some were left exposed, either due to fear of contagion or the sheer and overwhelming number of deceased. Corbett believed that the leopard, possibly while scavenging, might have come across these unburied bodies, thus developing a taste for human flesh. And once it realized that the humans were easy prey, especially in a region where they were abundant and accessible, the leopard's hunting patterns permanently shifted, as did its preference of prey. Parallels with other man-eaters, like the infamous Panar leopard, which also turned to human prey, contributed to his conclusion. Today, the terror of the past is but a distant memory, yet it has managed to leave a permanent mark on Rudraprayag. Till today, a signboard stands tall at the very spot where the leopard's reign of terror was brought to an end by Jim Corbett's bullet, serving not just as a grim reminder of the past, but also as a tribute to the resilience and spirit of the people of Rudraprayag. And every year, a fair is organized in the region, drawing locals and tourists alike. Here, amid the festivities, the tale of the man-eating leopard of Rudraprayag is till this day recounted and passed down from one generation to the next. If this episode piqued your interest, then our previous episode about a man that was mauled by a moose not far from his home is likely to do the same. You can find it on the end screen of this video.